microphone and give their vote and then turn their mic back off. Before we officially begin tonight's meeting, I'd like to first announce that the city will be recording this evening's meeting and the video will be posted to the city's YouTube channel as a means of increasing public access and transparency. And we'll start with the recording now. Good evening. Thanks all for joining tonight for this Community Environmental Advisory Committee meeting. My name is Anna Johnson and I'm Vice Chair of SEAC. I'll be facilitating the meeting tonight. Our Chair, Erin Niehoff, is traveling back from visiting her sister who just recently had a new baby. I'd like to start by noting this meeting includes the remote participation of members as authorized under Minnesota Statute Section 13D.021 due to the declared local health pandemic. Please keep yourself muted at all times that you're not speaking, and to keep the meeting moving along and on schedule, please wait your turn to speak and hold questions until the end of each speaker's presentation. Please remember that there is a chat function, but please remember that those who are calling in by phone cannot see the chat, and everything typed in the chat will be posted in the public meeting minutes. I'll do my best to verbally communicate relevant information that appears in the chat, but would also encourage folks to share pertinent information verbally rather than relying on the chat. For participants on the phone, press #6 to turn your microphone on and off to make a comment or question. I will now call this meeting to order and ask Kim to call the roll so we may verify the presence of a quorum. Council members, when Kim calls your name, please say present, but also try to introduce yourself briefly with your organization/affiliation as applicable. We'd like to try something new tonight and ask everyone to share one word or a few words to describe how you're feeling today and where you're at. For any community members on the call, we'll provide an opportunity for you to introduce yourself after the roll call is complete.
Great. Thank you, Anna. Max Dalton. I think he did actually tell us he was not going to be able to make it today. Indigo David Lu.
Present. I'm with Minnesota Youth for Climate Justice. Oh, and one word to describe how I'm feeling is I'm feeling very excited.
Mark Dennan.
I am present, and I'm also feeling good. I'm glad the wildfire smoke is not overwhelming these days, and it gave us a taste of what it's like to live in some places that have a lot worse air quality much more frequently than we do. So.
Thank you. Tess Dornfeld.
Present. Tess, she, her. Probably not very original today, but it is really hot. And again, maybe not quite as unusual for August, but a taste of things to come, I am afraid.
Thank you. Matthew Douglas May.
Hey everyone, I'm Matthew. I am feeling worried but also validated by the IPCC report.
Thank you. Sandy Fazeli.
Hi, Sandy Fazeli, SEAC member. Worried.
Thank you. Lauren Fleming.
Hi, Lauren, SEAC member, she, her pronouns. I am feeling electric because I just had some electric work done the past few days and I have some new outlets and light switches, which is nice.
Great. Were you dealing with some of the old electrical wiring and things like that?
Yeah, I got the knob and tube replaced, at least in my
Right.
basement and the attic when it's cooler. Well, few
Yes.
months.
Yes, all of the knob and tubes got to go to do our electrification stuff and solar and all that. So
Yeah,
but
switching to an electric dryer too. So
awesome. Thank you. Yeah, that's actually in part of legislation that there's quite a bit of money to upgrade knob and tube wiring in older houses in order to help do weatherization. So, and actually the utilities in the new ECO Act are required to provide a funding source with their conservation improvement program that will be able to overcome those kind of barriers, like knob and tube wiring or uninsulated crawl spaces and things like that. Sorry, we're in. Sorry, got off the track there. Divine Islam. Hi, are you calling in, Divine? Okay, I saw Leslie Jackson.
Here, hello, I'm feeling great. The sun is out shining. It's cool in the morning, cool in the evening. It's beautiful weather. Amazing.
Thank you. Anna Johnson.
Present, she, her, Anna Johnson, SEAC member. I also work for Fresh Energy, but I'm just representing myself at this meeting. And I would say I'm feeling kind of focused and ready to get through a packed agenda today.
Yes. Tanya Lopez.
Hello, everybody. This is Toya Lopez, SEAC member, as well as member of Health Professionals for a Healthy Climate and various other affiliations. Feeling kind of overwhelmed and mental fatigue, probably just because a lot of things are going on, but I still hope to be helpful during today's meeting. So.
Fantastic. Thank you. Sorry to hear I'm feeling fatigued. I know. Hot weather sometimes makes you feel a little tired, and then you got all this stuff going on, the IPCC and all this thing sort of hanging over your head. That's like, okay, what do we need to do? What do we need to do? You know, I know Barbara Lundy said she wasn't able to make it. We talked earlier today. So Nick Minderman.
I'm here and feeling very busy. Usually August is a slow time for me, but this year, lots going on.
All right. Jacqueline Cepeda.
Hi, I'm Jacqueline. I use they, them pronouns. I'm with the Minnesota Mycological Society, and I've been doing a lot of work with GNU Collective up north. And I'm feeling grateful.
Thank you. And I'll just call out Erin in case we're just sending out some good vibes if she's landing literally in right around sometime during our meeting. But anyway, our chair, Anna, we have 11 members present, so we do have a quorum to proceed with the meeting. Anna? Anna, are you still there?
I just checked the participant list and I don't see her any longer.
Oh, okay. All right.
Kim, while we're waiting for Anna to return, would it be appropriate to ask if there are any guests?
Yes, thank you. So are there any folks joining us? I know there's at least one person that's coming in from a phone call. Would you care to press #6 and identify yourself? And how you're feeling today?
Hey everybody, I'm going to assume this is me just because I am on the phone. This is Bjorn Olson with the City of Minneapolis Sustainability. Use he, him pronouns. Calling in today specifically in regards to the conversation around sustainable building policy. I would say a word I right now is a little frazzled. My son just took his diaper off and peed on the floor. So I'm going to try to be here as best I can. but I've got a bit of a handful. So
Yeah, no one likes to clean that up, but anyway, Anna's had a little difficulty on the app or something with the teams here. I know we're all fighting technology, and please, I'm going to ask for forgiveness right now because I'm not on the technology stuff. I seem to always run into something at some meeting somewhere. But Anna, are you back on? It looks like you might have actually just rejoined us here.
I am back on. Temporarily on my phone when my computer reboots, and don't have the script in front of me.
Okay.
Kim, do you mind helping me out?
Sure, you absolutely. Yeah. So basically what we're looking for is adoption of the agenda and the minutes from July 21st. In this case, there's an amendment. Wanted to bring forward one of our commissioners that asked earlier this week if we could do a brief update on the Hiawatha project and the AUAR of the Upper Harbor Terminal. So I can provide some updates on timing and dates on that. So I would propose to add that to the agenda. So we're looking for a motion to approve the agenda that was sent out with the update being added sort of right at the beginning, just to sort of give the latest info on where things are at with those projects, and then proceed with the remainder of the agenda as it's detailed in the agenda that was sent out and posted.
I'll move to approve the amended agenda and the minutes.
I second. This is Sandy.
Thank you. Okay. Give me just a second to all right. Okay, Max is not here. Indigo David Lu. Please say yay or nay or yes or no.
Sorry.
No worries. We didn't say that, so that's totally understandable. It's different from like I'm here or present or whatever from the first one too. All right, Mark Dennan.
Yay.
Tess Dornfeld.
Yay.
Matthew Douglas May.
Yay.
Sandy Fazeli.
Yes.
Lauren Fleming.
Yay.
Leslie Jackson.
Yay.
Anna Johnson.
Yay.
Tanya Lopez.
Yay.
Thank you. Nick Minderman.
Yes.
Jacqueline Cepeda.
Yay.
Chair Johnson, we have 11 yays, so approval of the minutes from July 21st. And the agenda for today is approved.
Great. Thanks so much. And is the next item on the agenda is, Kim, for you to provide an update?
Yeah. So on the Hiawatha project, kind of exciting recent news here just came out of the Policy and Government Oversight Committee, the POGO committee, as it's referred to as an acronym. And on the Hiawatha project, it was an interesting decision, but Councilmember Cano, Gordon, Johnson, and Jenkins put forward a staff direction that basically directs staff to move forward with the parking structure on the old site, not the old site, the existing site, not the new site that they're proposing redevelopment, but an existing public works site, just north of 26th Street, as well as a couple of other project, sort of smaller staff buildings on that site. So it'll sort of densify that site and to then also stop any kind of development or demolition on the new site and give an opportunity for the neighborhood to basically secure the site. This interesting thing that happened in it was that the proposal by Councilmember Khanna, which had these sort of detailed lists, had a item that was referred to as 2C, which was also the proposal that went forward that was presented last week at the operating committee of the city council. But in other words, basically, what happened was that Council Member Ellison abstained on one of the items of the Councilmember Kano's motion, which was to give exclusive development rights to the East Phillips Neighborhood Organization to develop the farm proposal that they're talking about. So it has not been determined what happens next, but it leaves it up in the air that there could be in our request for proposals to develop the site as compared to sort of working with the neighborhood on the proposal that's on the table. So the project at this point, within this committee vote, and it will be going to council this Friday, which it passed the committee on a 6-7 vote. Basically, that abstention was a no vote. So that's where it sits right now. I'm just giving you an update. I'm just sort of literally this happened at 4:50. The decision was made. So it's a bit up in the air what's going to happen. But right now, the way it looks is that everything's going to stop on the city side of things, and that it will be looked at for a redevelopment proposal, and would take into consideration all of the community input and develop a community process to, if they did do something with an RFP, to have a more extensive community involvement. So that's where that is at on the Hiawatha project. And like I said, there'll be some more decisions this Friday at the council meeting. And with the 6-7 vote, I wouldn't be surprised if there was some maneuvering on a modified motion at the council meeting. Happy to take questions as far as what we know right now. I will add one more thing. The council did vote unanimous. I shouldn't say unanimously, actually, it did not. 12-1. Councilmember Kano did not vote for the approval, or it's more or less the approval / acceptance of the environmental assessment worksheet, the EAW. Otherwise, it went through 12-1.
Thanks so much, Kim. Appreciate you giving that very timely update. Nick, you have your hand up.
Yeah, Kim, if there's going to be a stakeholder process, is there any clarity on who would be leading that? Is that going to end up falling on facility services, which is, I think, what, part of finance, or is that actually going to go over to CPED or some other agency within the city?
Right now, there's pretty limited capacity to do a stakeholder-led process at property services, which is, as you said, part of finance, which is part of the coordinator's office too. So it's a sort of its own department. Sustainability is a division under a department. Yeah, so that would very, very likely, this size of project for sure is considered an economic development project, 7 acres. It will be led by CPED. I think there's opportunities to do it differently, and maybe that might be a way to think about it too. So, but property services is not really staffed up in that level. They take care of buildings. I mean, they've got 100+ union tradespeople that do plumbing, electrical. That's sort of the bread and butter of property services. So any kind of more expansive development like this property would present would be a CPET project. I'm almost sure of it.
Tess? Looks like you're muted.
There we go. Thanks, Kim. Really useful to get up to the minute. So it sounds like the decision between an EIS or an EAW might not be relevant anymore, but does that 12-to-1 vote sort of rule out the possibility of going with an EIS, even if they were to switch back to the public works plan?
The recommendation that was made by the staff recommendation, it wasn't explicit in the request for council action, but it is in the EAW recommendation. So accepting the EAW would accept the fact that there's no justification or reason to move forward with an EIS. So effectively, yes, the 12-1 vote eliminates an EIS. If it's a new project, though, Hillary Dvorak was very clear about this. This is specific to this project. Anything else that's developed on this site would require an EAW. And quite honestly, I would assume that if the EPNI project was selected, or that became it, I would assume they would go through an EAW process, because of course they called for that before, as a way to demonstrate the environmental attributes and additions they would be making to the neighborhood. So it's not necessarily always negative. It certainly can be talked about because of mitigation, and talks about cumulative impacts. And so anyway, it'd be a good process to go through for any development that would be there.
Any other questions? Discussion. It sounds like I was watching the meeting as well too. So my impression was that there will be more opportunities going forward, kind of to participate in a process, and that there's it's really not exactly set in stone what exactly will happen, but there's staff direction that's to be followed, and there's kind of a deadline of 2023 to potentially raise the funds to move forward with the proposed alternative project.
Good point. Yeah, so I mean, that was actually, I think, a pretty important and very significant date to have in there, because I think anything that's shorter than that is just not reasonable to be able to develop these kinds of innovative projects. And so it would create a conflict with the city again and staff a year from now. So realistically, but that did include holding costs for the city of $4 million. So there's definitely issues around where that money comes from, and what doesn't happen that could have happened if we're having to maintain the property with no productivity for the next 2 years. So, and there were also some really good conversations about the staff and the need to provide clean water and infrastructure. And I will say that we take that for granted here. There's many other places around the country and other sustainability people I talk to, and especially with Black and brown people around the country, it is not a given that your house has clean water coming into it. Well, we just got to talk about Flint, but I mean, it's common all over the place. There's 10 million or more people that do not have access to clean water across the country. So it's a big deal. And of course, the majority of those are brown and Black people. So I guess the next thing we're going to talk about is the AUAR, the Alternative Urban Area-Wide Review Plan for the Upper Harbor Terminal.
Yeah, sorry, Kim, to interrupt. I just remembered while while I was having technical difficulties, did you read the land acknowledgement by any chance?
Oh, no, I did not. I'm sorry, I did not.
No, that's okay. I'll pull that up. So I'll just pause, and my apologies for missing this while I was getting my computer rebooted. As we meet here today, we are reminded that Minneapolis is situated on the homelands of the Dakota people, an area that is steeped in rich indigenous history. It is home to indigenous people from more than 30 different nations. As a city, we have a responsibility to care for the land on which we live and work and all its natural surroundings. The stewardship is an integral part of our involvement in this commission, and we honor it as we begin our meeting. We now open this space to discuss ways in which we can support indigenous people in our community. Nick?
Yeah, so part of the reason why I asked the question about who is leading the stakeholder process if something happens on the Hiawatha site is that I know that previously, because the project was specifically about development of a city asset, that process was managed by facilities, and there were a lot of community concerns about whether facilities was capable of or was listening to their concerns. And so I think something that, given the large population of indigenous people in East Phillips, I think we should strongly advocate if anything appears that if it appears that CPAD will not be taking that lead role, or NCR or some other organization that's more familiar with culturally sensitive outreach, I think CX should step in and advocate for that. Obviously, this is rapidly developing, so maybe it's not something you need to do right now, but something that I think is worth continuing to watch.
Thank you. Yeah, that's well taken. Anyone else want to chime in? I will just let folks know, if you haven't heard, there's a Treaty Peoples gathering on Wednesday evening at the state capitol. Folks have been walking. I can't remember exactly their starting point, but I think it's over 500 miles, and are ending at the state capitol this Wednesday to protest Line 3. So it looks like Tess may have more information on that. Go ahead, Tess.
256 miles.
Okay, 256.
Yeah, and there'll be events all week. You can go to treatiesnottarsands.com, and they have all the info on that webpage. And there'll be events all week, but especially on Wednesday afternoon, the walkers will be arriving, having lunch at the MLK building, and then finishing the walk to the Capitol. And folks are encouraged to join, especially that day. But all the details are at treatiesnottarsands.com.
Thank you.
Tess, can I ask a follow-up question? Is there any specific significance to the 256 miles?
They started at the first headwaters crossing, where the pipeline route crosses the headwaters of the Mississippi, and then went to the headwaters of the river at Itasca, and then have walked from there. But not a special number, that's just the route.
Okay, thanks.
All right. Sensing no other additions, Kim, can I kick it back to you for the AUAR update on Upper Harbor Terminal?
Sure. So what we've got going on right now is, we had an update on the Upper Harbor Terminal And basically this is sort of one of those combinations of environmental review and sort of like what's the impact from different kinds of scenarios, like very high density to lower density and different types of uses. And that's what makes up the analysis. Where we are right now is that we've had an opportunity to see what's been put out there. There's public comments that have been going out. The anticipation on just the schedules that will go in front of the business and housing committee, business housing and zoning committee on Tuesday, August 24th. So next week, Tuesday. And then it would go in front of the regular city council on September 10th. So that's sort of the next process. I spoke with Hillary Dvorak. There are no changes or updates that they're proposing. Again, this is a process of analyzing like what's going on, and there will be some remediation effects. All of the land use types of contamination will be remediated. There will be, it's very contained about stormwater runoff and disturbing the soil because of its proximity to it's on the shoreline of the Mississippi River. So there will be a whole level of ground disturbance approved by the state MPCA that's part of it. There are some challenges that of the report that I think we could consider here. And that includes that the level of the impact of emissions from cars and additional traffic to the site is not well documented scientifically. And we're going to go into this a little bit later, but we've been seeing a trend in which the actual miles per gallon for cars are becoming less efficient in the trends. A little bit here, a little bit there. But one of one of the assumptions of the AUAR is that miles per gallon is going to be increasing, and therefore, even though there's an increase in the amount of traffic to the site, emissions levels will be less than what they are today. But there's not a lot of evidence trend-wise that that's happening. And when you're that's nice to say if you're in a cornfield, but when you're in an impacted community where emissions are already extremely high because, of course, there's a freeway 2 blocks away, not a freeway, an interstate 2 blocks away, emissions levels aren't sort of like a push and just be like, well, it's better than what's there now. So there's that concern that's within the AUAR that should probably be addressed. I know they're aware of it. I brought it up at a meeting I was at last night with the Public Policy Project, and Brandon Champeau from the United Properties was there. And I know there's some additional things with it, but I just wanted to sort of update on where things are at. I think there's still a lot of movement in it. It's not perfect. I'm not recommending we approve it unless we've looked at a little bit more about how we're talking about mitigating things. So if there were any comments, it would probably be around really pushing the idea of trying to create a carbon negative environment, which doesn't sound great. We got to come up with a different word, but one that actually produces less carbon or absorbs more carbon and carbon negative than it actually produces. So with the 19 acres of parkland with this and things, it's possible. So again, if SEAC was going to, the comments are sort of closed, but there's the process. But there are a bit of some flaws in there, and that may be worthwhile bringing back to have a more further discussion on transportation and how we address those particular issues, because it's not unique to the Upper Harbor Terminal. Basically, with the Comp Plan 2040, with the increase in density, this issue will, and this play between like, oh yeah, we have rapid adoption of EVs, so therefore emissions are going down, even though we have more cars driving. That is an interesting dichotomy that we have as we move forward with sustainability, because without that kind of EV adoption, we're not going to be able to, we're not seeing anyway currently reduction in emission levels as more cars are added.
Thanks, Kim. Sandy?
Hey, Kim, thanks so much for that update. So am I understanding correctly that they're proceeding with the final AUAR presented to City Council with that error in the fuel efficiency? And also ignoring SEAC's other comments?
That is my understanding, yes.
Okay. So then our next step is to flag that for council members, that there are issues? Okay.
Yeah. I mean, and again, I you know, that's one of those, and it identifies much of what the issues are as far as cleanup and things like that. But yeah, that's one of the things that comes up, and so anyway, I'm just trying to think about like how we frame that, even though I know it's coming up this way. But I think it's worthwhile for us to if we did want to make some kind of official movement, that we look at some of these kinds of assumptions. If we were going to make a motion, it would round transportation or buildings, that unless we're going to net zero energy, this is just going to be adding emissions to the community. So let's take a deeper dive on the assumptions.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think I'd love others' thoughts on whether we submit a letter to City Council with our, you know, as an appendix, our original comments on the draft AUAR, but also digging into some of these assumptions that are conveniently ignoring the greenhouse gas emissions impacts.
Yeah, are there other thoughts about that possibility of submitting a letter to City Council prior to September 12th vote? I guess that would mean at least coming up with some like talking points at this point, and then kind of filling in the exact wording of it maybe offline if folks feel comfortable with that. Go ahead, Tess.
Yeah, I would certainly be in favor of bringing these up to City Council and making sure we make them aware of our concerns. Aaron put a lot of work into the comment letter that we made on the draft AUAR, and it's pretty discouraging to hear that they're not really addressing any of those or other. I'm sure there were also many others making comments on that. And I think also, yeah, one of the big things to me is that, especially, you know, our other topics of conversation right now and the IPCC reports being front of mind, the fact that the AUAR just doesn't include climate analysis is pretty unacceptable. I think the Environmental Quality Board is considering making that a requirement, and I think we should do better than just meeting the minimum requirements of the moment and really be at the forefront of you know, the best practices in doing our analysis, especially for such a significant project. Can I ask to clarify, next month's meeting, there have been kind of mixed messages about which week it is. It would maybe be sort of too short. I think it would obviously be better to get our comments to council more than 2 days ahead of their vote, but worth asking anyway, if we are meeting on the 8th or if it's the following week. Thanks.
Yeah, just to respond to Tess, we are meeting on the 15th next month. I'm sorry, I should say that. Yeah, so it's the week after. The council will meet. They have a committee schedule off that week of Labor Day, but they actually meet on the city council that week. So the biz committee, even though it's on the 24th, that committee meeting doesn't push forward into the city council full approval meeting until September 10th because of the Labor Day weekend. So we'd have the ability to get to council, even though it's ideally, you know, something would happen with the committee meeting. But I had something today happen with the renewable energy RFP thing I've been working on with property services that got pulled off committee and delayed for 3 weeks because there's some concerns. But so anyway, the point is that there's opportunity to have that kind of improvement, and certainly any kind of council action or movement, council or motion, I should say, can include you know, staff recommendations on looking at the transportation or different things. So certainly worthwhile to bring up as we move forward.
So Kim, sorry, just to clarify, do you think that would that mean that we should come up with something to say at this meeting rather than at the next meeting?
Yeah, that would be my recommendation.
Okay, cool. Leslie, did you have your hand up?
I did. I disagreed that, I mean, I agree with what Tess was saying, as well as Kim. I feel that we should get this letter together. And Aaron did work very hard, and we did brainstorm. And I think it's a very important factor in our community that our voices be heard, especially in some big project like this, especially with the contaminated soil and transportation and things like that. So I just agree that we do need to talk to these city council again, or reach out to them. Thank you.
Cool. Thanks, Leslie. Nick?
I don't like the idea of suggesting a special meeting, but I think it's worth mentioning that if we don't feel prepared tonight, especially with Aaron's absence and Aaron's role in this, it may be appropriate for once Aaron gets back to confer with Anna and Kim and decide if maybe we can adopt something, but if it's insufficient, we can always call a special meeting for further clarification too, to get something ready in time. I think everybody knows I prefer to actually move it forward as I have in the past, but Aaron's just so important to this conversation that I think we need to. Aaron's been following it for what, 4 or 5 years, and hearing the perspective of what has worked and what hasn't in the past would be really valuable to me at least, and I think to all the other commissioners.
Yeah, thanks, Nick. I'm wondering if maybe one option could be, since we have a quorum here, would be to move to adopt, move to delegate a smaller group to write a letter at kind of the direction of the chair, and we can note any top line points that we want to make sure to give her direction on, and try to schedule the meeting at a time when most people are able to come, but maybe not necessitate a quorum being present. Does that make sense? Nick, I see you got your hand up.
That was from the last time, but I am concerned that will get us crossways with the clerk's office, because anytime we are meeting to work on something related to commission matters in a remote environment, at least, I think that we already were kind of pushing boundaries last year, and I don't want our work to be invalidated by a procedural matter. So I think if we were to do something, I think we would instead give firm direction and give the chair make it the chair's privilege to determine who she wishes to consult with when revising the letter, rather than directing it to be a specific group of people. and creating the idea that we're doing work outside of the committee.
Okay, great. Yeah, that makes sense.
I would agree with that sort of assessment. It's completely fine for SEAC to say, hey, we'll have the chair, vice chair, and volunteer commission members work out the details to cover, responses to the AUAR. And then, of course, we can list some of those. And I just actually posted in the meeting chat some things that have come up that we've been looking at within sustainability that might have been, a little bit limiting or concerns we have, kind of good and bad. But some of the things, again, on transportation and just sort of cumulative effect of air pollution are sort of not keeping up with our sort of current understanding of the impacts that air pollution can have on your health and resiliency to the COVID and everything else, right? So I just put something like that, but certainly I agree with Nick that would be best, which would then be able to give us the ability to have, because otherwise you're right, we have to do a special posted meeting. We can do it. We have to have 5 days, business days notice and whatever. I can just put it in the calendar. It's not a big deal. But it will definitely catch the eye of the city clerk if we're having a separate meeting with somebody off the current calendar, which was required to be put in by like March 1st. So I know that. Anyway.
Okay, great. Thank you for that clarification. Would someone want to make a motion to that, kind of in that vein? I think directing the chair to draft a letter to send to city staff responding to the updated AUAR, expressing CX concerns around things that were omitted and including transportation assessments and climate change impact assessments and other issues.
I'm okay with that. I would just like it to go to city council, not city staff.
Oh, sorry. Yes, thank you.
Yeah, I actually added in. I was going to make that recommendation too, that it go to city staff, of course, CPED and the folks and us, sustainability, the mayor and city council, including further analysis of transportation, climate change, and air quality impacts.
And maybe and other issues at the discretion of the chair.
Yeah, good idea.
And before we vote on this, I just want to recognize that this is sort of a decent amount of latitude to give to Erin. I feel comfortable with it because I know she's been working on it for a long time, but just also want to leave it offer the question if anyone doesn't feel good about this or has concerns about this, if anyone wants to share that or talk about that for a moment.
Can I just ask Anna if we can get Sandy had made a motion on that. Can we just get a second just from someone just so we can jump in the discussion?
Got it. Yes, thank you. Robert's rules. Okay.
Sorry, I wanted to add one more thing before the motion. Could we also add that our letter would address the lack of integration of public comments in the AUAR presumably they're also not integrating comments from the Northern Green Zones Task Force and other community groups.
Thanks, Danny.
And Anna, I also don't have any concerns. I trust Darren with a lot of things.
I will second the motion as Sandy amended it. And I don't want to just dump this all onto Erin, but obviously she is very engaged and would be happy to, review or add, make suggestions or help out as needed. But I'm also confident in sharing our conversation with her and leaving it to her discretion. Thanks.
Thanks, Tess. Nick, is your hand up? From
my hand is
you?
up. Yes, my hand is up. I just wanted to call it because this is going to the city council members. Just want to note the similarity to the Hiawatha project where we were about a year and a month ago. And I think it's important to note that since as SEAC members, we are appointed by city council members or the mayor. And even if we're a mayoral appointee, we live in a city council member's ward, that following the letter, part of what I think got the Hiawatha project back on the docket was a lot of people reaching out to city council members and giving them room to feel like they could revisit a discussion that all, in individual conversations, it all seemed like it was a done deal to them. But once we started hearing things and sharing similarities with conversations, it created some, hopefully that was part of what created some momentum. So I think our responsibility doesn't just end with sending the letter, but hopefully all of us are able to take some action to reach out and begin those conversations with council members to make sure that either when this vote comes up for the first time or in future votes on Upper Harbor Terminal, that we're maybe slowing some of the momentum against what the community is looking for.
Thanks, Nick. I appreciate the context.
Sorry, if I could just completely emphasize Nick's point, I think that's a really good one. The other pattern I'm noticing from last year is Hillary Dvorak and sort of I know that she wasn't around for the Hiawatha project stakeholder engagement process, but that also had a lot of polls. But she sort of stood by it and really defended it last year. And so I think we should keep an eye on CPED and the planning and stakeholder engagement process for any other projects that come up, including the Hiawatha if that gets revisited.
Thanks, Sandy. Yes, noted. So I think any other discussion around this motion and offering Erin the latitude to come up with a letter, and I'm happy to help her with that as well. You're muted, Kim.
Did we include at the discretion of the chair and vice chair? Is that what we're saying? Sort of like, because I think that would be better just because you're here, Anna, and just because Erin's not in the room at the time. So
right, yeah, that works for me. Yeah.
Is that amenable to Sandy?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. And I'm sorry again. Who did the second on that? Was it Nick?
I did.
I think it was Tess.
Tess. Okay. Interestingly, I had typed in Tess from before, but it was in made the motion, and I'm like, oh wait, that's not right. Anyway, thank you. So we have a motion to approve writing a letter to clarify the AUAR to be sent to city staff, the mayor, and city council, requesting further analysis of transportation, climate change, air quality, and lack of inclusion of public comments in responses to the alternative urban area-wide plan for the Upper Harbor Terminal. The letter, well, I didn't put this in. I have to figure out how we make the transit. Inclusion of public comments of local community groups and other issues at the discretion of the chair and vice chair.
Yeah, maybe like the letter may address.
Okay. Thank you. Well, I think we have the intention pretty solid, so we got a little flexibility, so we'll make sure that gets done there. Okay. All right. So I will please answer by saying yay or nay. Indigo David Lu.
Yay.
Thank you. Mark Dennan.
Yay.
Tess Dornfeld.
Yay.
Matthew Douglas May.
Yay.
Danny Fazzelli.
Yes.
Lauren Fleming.
Yay.
Leslie Jackson.
Yay.
Anna Johnson.
Yay.
Tanya Lopez.
Yay.
Nick Minderman.
Yes.
Jacqueline Cepeda.
Yay.
Terrific. We have 12 yays, and that motion carries.
Excellent. Thanks, Kim, and thanks everyone for the discussion that was last minute. So appreciate everyone's engagement on that. So moving on to our agenda the agenda 1.0 is a discussion on the International Panel on Climate Change report. And I'd like to ask Kim to present a Mentimeter poll, if that's what we're doing right now, but I'll hand it over to Kim to start this phase.
Well, yeah, thanks. I just kind of wanted to just, see if folks had, what sort of folks' initial reactions were. I think we should just skip the Mentimeter poll since we're at 6:03 right now.
Sounds good. Yeah.
I hate to say it, I know it took a lot, but this is a lot interesting updates that we've had, and thanks to Tess for making sure we stay on top of it, because it's really important. What I thought we could just jump into is kind of where we are at in the climate change greenhouse gas emissions. We've actually completed our draft inventory analysis, and but I'd like to jump into that next, unless folks want to express, thoughts, reactions, feedback. I added some different links within the agenda about resources and reaction to the IPCC report, but obviously it says that we have approximately 8 years or so to be able to stop a 2.0 Celsius degree increase. We're already locked in on 1.5%, and that's going to have the impact we're having today, plus others, for the next 30 years. So really about a lot of things I take away from it. We're going to have to be able to figure out how to be resilient in a world that's hotter, drier, sometimes wetter, but very localized differences throughout the country, throughout the world. And so how do we become more resilient as we become more sustainable? And I think, and more adaptive, and how do we use our natural resources to really help us as they have in the past? So, and we have to be able to be bold. I mean, just like we talked about earlier before some folks came on, I mean, there's just sort of a switch. Fossil fuel companies are now like putting a ton of energy into creating plastics. Because it's another avenue for revenue for fossil fuels. And how do we, get a control of all that aspect, as well as the energy and and then really use this as a leverage point. But it says we need to do more, faster, quicker. That's ultimately what it is. So I'm just kind of curious if other folks wanted to share their thoughts or reactions about what they've heard or read about the IPCC. And then I can share a bit about where we're at with our community emissions.
Yes, Andy.
Yeah, my family's from the Middle East, and you know, we left when you know, decades ago, but because of, you know, Western dependence on fossil fuels, and I think it's really interesting that, like, what's going on in Afghanistan this week, you know, the IPCC, you know, this is all stuff that we knew was going to happen for decades, and it's all interrelated. And it's just kind of, I know somebody in the introduction said, like, maybe they were disheartened or something. And it just kind of feels like, you know, our whole group is focused on this, but how do we start making the connections beyond? And I know even, you know, for my ward, the council member has not been particularly interested in, like, sustainability discussions or, you know, engaged on those kinds of issues. So it's kind of a ramble, but I guess it's just trying to put, like, a really broad lens on how critical this issue. I guess also how grateful I am that groups like this exist. So thank you all for being here.
Thanks, Andy. Yeah, I feel like one of the reactions I've had too is along similar lines, is just thinking about governance in you know, a hotter, wetter, drier, more chaotic world. And I mean, it hasn't worked so far, but, like, it's really truly in government's best interest to get this under control. And it's just so obvious that that's true. And maybe this will help make the case a little bit better, but it's hard to have a stable society when all this is going on. So that's something that's kind of been on my mind.
I'm just curious if we could hear from folks who haven't you know, spoken up on the other topics. Want to just share their thoughts about the IPC and what they've heard. I mean, maybe Mark Dennan or Matthew Douglas May, who haven't spoken yet today. Excuse me just a minute.
I can chime in. I think it's obviously not surprising for anybody who's been following the IPCC's reports over the past decades, but the fact that we're at, like, 1 to 2 years to act, I hope would maybe encourage more urgency, because I think humans in general have a hard time, like, thinking about and acting upon issues that are, like, way far into the future, but, like, it's here. So I'm hoping that this report will spur more urgency, and make it harder to ignore, because if we don't act, then we'll all be living in it. So yeah, those are my thoughts.
Thanks, Matthew. Mark?
Yeah, and I just agree with everything that's been said. I didn't raise my hand because I was just nodding violently on my end. But I guess my biggest concern is that this report, most recent report, probably isn't going to change the mind of a lot of climate deniers. You know, so but we just need to redouble our efforts to go faster and farther and I think it does validate everything that we've been talking about. So I just wish it had more impact on the broader public.
Hello, this is Toya. Oh, sorry if I'm supposed to have my hand up. I'll continue real quick.
Go for it.
My question would be, and this is like a maybe general question into the ether, is like, well, like what do we have to do, right, to make this a priority, right? Because for a lot of us here, we've been probably involved in sustainability and climate change for a while, right? And kind of working on things that are important and such, yet we continue to have projects that are being slated for like 3 or 5 years in the future that continue with the same issues, right? That we should have dealt with like a few years ago. And so I'm just wondering, like, how can we essentially hold like people who make decisions more accountable? Because in some other committees that I'm involved in, and maybe here as well, some people might feel that like you have an advisory committee, right? But then there's no real accountability that the organization or whatnot that's seeking this advice will do anything with it, right? And so it's like we're spinning our wheels, but maybe that's just a bit of the frustration coming out. So.
Thanks, Toya. No, I think this is exactly the right question to be asking: is how do we get through to people with the actual power to change things. Leslie, did you have your hand up?
Yeah, I think it's quite interesting being a person of color and listening to all these talks and different meetings that I've been attending. Even when I was studying at the U, it's like all these problems they say they dump in the Black or the poor communities, and I think the people are in denial think that that's where it stays, but I don't care where you travel across the country or the world, we're all affected by everything and it's all interconnected. But if they keep thinking that it's all only in one certain part of the city or whatever, whatever place they might think it might be, it's a lie. And we're all affected, just like Kim pointed out, across the city and across the country. People have bad water and air and things, but people, I don't know. Maybe they're blind to the fact that they're breathing it as well. I don't know, but being able to talk to the leaders in our community and those that make the decision and let them know that this affects them, and if they don't, then maybe some samples besides data. Physical samples, and let them stand there, let them breathe it. I don't know what else to do to let people know that this affects them as well. I sit on these different environmental committees and I hear, oh, we got money for the Black community and the Black community gets 2%. And I think putting it in that sense makes people not, I don't know. I don't really know if it's a race thing still or what. To me, it's a human thing, and that everything connects. So I don't see color, but I don't understand why they separate it that way. And it's frustrating to me as a scientist to know the changes in the climate and what we as humans endure, but we don't see that as making decisions. We only see the dollars and the money and the people and how much we can profit off of the people and the money that we can get from disparities and things. So I don't know, but I'm just glad I'm a part of it to try to make some kind of change and difference. And that's all I got to say. Thank you.
Thanks, Leslie. Yeah. I do think there's a misconception too about the cost of sustainability and the cost of decarbonization versus the cost of not decarbonizing, and that kind of math isn't always clear. And I think you're right too. Lived experiences are powerful for getting through to people. The wildfire smoke was one such example for me personally in the past month, where it even working on climate change all the time and talking about stuff, I really felt it differently when I was breathing in smoke and stuck in my house. Any other thoughts before talking about the city's current emissions trajectory? Cool. I'll hand it over to Kim.
Okay, thanks, Anna. I will try to get this share the screen. Can folks see that right now? The title page,
Yep.
the greenhouse gas emissions.
Yeah.
Perfect. Okay, so these are preliminary results that we have. We take greenhouse gas emissions every year based on a baseline from 2006. And of course, we have the Climate Action Plan goals to reduce our carbon emissions by 30% by 2025 and to reduce our carbon emissions by 80% by 2050. These are going to be reconsidered, of course, as part of an update of our Climate Action Plan that we are excited to start later this year and sort of get the meat and potatoes going next year. But I wanted to show you kind of where things are at right now. Believe it, well, you can believe it. We're in COVID, right? 32% reduction since 2006 in carbon emissions as a result of COVID. I think there's two really big factors that are part of this. One is that we saw a significant increase in carbon neutral or carbon free energy sources from Excel. Part of that is that there was kind of a load shift from the day to the evening in which there's actually more wind energy and more renewable energy. So as a percentage of the energy produced, it was a banner year in 2020, and therefore the carbon intensity of electricity decreased quite a bit. But the real big factor that decreased in these projections is vehicle miles traveled. We saw a decrease of about 24% in vehicle miles traveled, even though we saw half a gallon mile per gallon increase in the reduction in fuel efficiency for cars. So this only reflects about a 20% decline in emissions, even though we had a vehicle mile traveled emission reduction of about 24%. And we did see also a 5% reduction in natural gas emissions, which was really it's in the weatherization, like each year that it can go up and down 5% pretty easily as a result of different weather. So there wasn't anything really to draw from there. One of the interesting also things is that solid waste, again, no surprise here, was actually increased. So we got all those packages delivered from DoorDash and Amazon, and that actually increased our emissions. It's a very small portion of overall emissions. It's in the 1-2% range, but it still was an unfortunate increase, and again, not surprising based on the situation we were in. Whoops, sorry. So here's where we are in electricity emissions. We're off on electricity, which is pretty amazing, 60% reduction in carbon emissions. So these systemic changes to using coal fire as our base for electricity production is proving to be a very significant strategy to reduce our carbon emissions. Getting rid of coal, closing them down, doing it sooner, all of that very beneficial. Natural gas, we're actually, even though we saw a 4% reduction in the last 2019 to 2020 year, we actually saw a 6% increase. So we are getting more efficient homes and on the margin, but the expansion, the use of natural gas still is exceeding our baseline. On-road transportation, again, efficiencies mainly in miles per gallon have driven this, not in vehicle miles traveled, other than this last year. Extremely significant. You'll see that 6% basically is what's been changed in the last 14 years from car fuel efficiencies. But that is extremely important for us to continue to push. But the idea of us not driving as much is pretty significant. You'll see here on solid waste, we actually increased a little bit. Overall, it's down. We're kind of holding steady, relatively speaking, as you can tell, against the other emissions. Pretty small. Wastewater, very significant. The city is moving forward with a multi-megawatt installation at our waterworks facility in Fridley that will actually drop this down to well below 50% reduction in emissions within the next couple of years. So fewer cars on the road, less electricity being used in our office, retail, entertainment spaces, consumption dropped by 5%. That is crazy when you think about how much development has been going on in the last few years in Minneapolis. It is the most significant drop we have, of course, ever seen since tracking this, 19% in 1 year. So really affected by changes in our sort of the way we live. You might remember that Luke Luke Hollenkamp was here to talk last month about the race to zero. And what's interesting is our latest emission, which is this purple dot right here, kind of puts us right on track of the race to zero scenarios based on the science-based fair share stuff. Targets that we've talked about, and then Mark Dennan had talked about how they're really looking at this as far as race to zero and getting to net zero energy. You'll see that we need to have this kind of a change that we had in 2019 to 2020, basically on an annual basis to get us to our fair share reductions. So we'll need to continue what we've been doing. What's challenging about that, of course, is that the city of Minneapolis is built on a very robust downtown office space, commercial building environment. We are the central city. We are the business hub. We are the financial and legal center and the government center of the 10th most prosperous county in all of the United States. We are the Orange County, like in California, of Minnesota. So this means we'd have to be doing a lot of things differently here in Minneapolis and in Hennepin County to achieve those particular goals. But it really shows interestingly, what's possible, and interestingly, what we've actually could achieve with a year that was so different than what we've experienced before. So this is a little convoluted here. With lots of different things, but our electricity production to get by 2030 to 100% renewable electricity, that we know we can do. This line right here is actually the IRP, the Integrated Resource Plan from Xcel Energy's alternative plan they just produced on end of June. It's pretty close to getting us to, this is renewable electricity and carbon neutrality. And then we have the current plan that's been in here that stays up here. This is really the issue that we continue to have, is the natural gas projection without a significant change in the way that we're heating our buildings will continue to be an extremely difficult nut to crack. So we have solutions here. We should continue on the renewable electricity side. natural gas would become really our biggest nut to crack. And so that's kind of an update on where things are at with our latest GHG emissions. We haven't released these publicly. We typically go to council in the fall to give these inventory projection updates, and then we release it. So we're right now just verifying where things are at with our utility partners and making sure that our numbers look good, and so we'll that's where things are at right now on our emissions reduction. So it's a sneak peek. We haven't shared this at all with anybody at this point, so happy to take questions, and then any suggestions, thoughts, of course, too.
Awesome. Thanks, Kim, for the presentation and sneak peek. That's really informative. Mark, you want to kick us off?
Yeah, so I agree. Very interesting information, Kim. In my mind, it's going to be very important to see what lasting impacts of the pandemic we have, as far as, permanent reductions in office space, maybe, more of a conversion to remote working. In the company I work for, most of our offices around the world are still closed, and where we've done some pilot return to work projects, making it a voluntary thing. You can go in if you want. We've had very few takers. I would say in the range of 10 to 15% of people are volunteering to go back to work. So I suspect we are going to definitely see a reduction in the amount of office space that we need. We've already divested, several of our facilities, and I'm wondering what might happen for Minneapolis in that regard. And maybe that would open the potential for office spaces to be converted into housing of some sort or some other kind of office. And then just one other comment, our company also saw a significant reduction in absolute energy use during the pandemic. It's starting to tick back up as our manufacturing is back up to capacity already. But again, when you have a lot of empty office space and unused space, we saw our efficiency actually get worse. So our consumption went down overall, but our consumption per unit produced got worse during the pandemic. So again, just we saw some similar things to what you were reporting.
Thank you. That's really interesting. Yeah, I really believe, in sort of seeing some things. There was actually an article that I read about a week and a half ago in the Wall Street Journal about that they did some surveying 5 years out. 70% of all businesses are seeing a reduction in the total office space that they will be occupying. Much of this is going to be in transition. I think there's actually going to be a fairly significant drop off right from the get-go. We're seeing it the same thing in the city of Minneapolis. We have a very split dichotomy of folks. Third say, no, I don't want to come back. Third say, yes, I want to be back in the office. Third saying we need some sort of hybrid. That's classic. But what it points to is when you think about even just with a large employer with nearly 3,000 employees in downtown Minneapolis, is that we're likely not to really need to. We don't need a third of the space maybe we had planned for. When you think about just, a third of the people aren't going to come in at all. So yes, it will be a very different community. And actually, I want to think about how we can take advantage of that. One of the things, being a downtown resident living in 9th and Portland, I loved was when they were actually able to close off some of the streets around, the river or the lakes or things like that. And that was due to the fact that we didn't have all the people moving in rush hour all the time, and just like getting everyone everywhere all the time, you couldn't really do that. But then people weren't going back and forth. So how do we kind of transition into the office commercial to housing space that also can create some really cool, carbon free zones and carbon negative zones along our natural amenities. So all of those kind of things I think are really interesting, that are a positive about a lower carbon future. So, but anyway, I appreciate what your thoughts on that, Mark. And yeah, it's another topic we could have, just about like, what do we see as the vision of our urban downtown in light of what we're starting to see maybe roll out as far as our transition to a different, future.
Thanks, Kim. Yeah, that does pose a lot of opportunities. I think I saw Nick's hand up next.
Yeah, I wanted to comment on two things. I think first, the graph about electric versus natural gas highlights that talking about net zero isn't enough, because net zero is premised on the idea that you're using in most cases you're using electricity production and the presumed carbon reduction from that to displace your natural gas emissions. And eventually, if you have 100% renewable or nearly 100% renewable system, it's going to be really challenging to be able to displace enough emissions to take care of your natural gas. And so I think there's a lot of people talking about net zero, but I think as an advisory commission, we need to think about, does that actually solve our problem or not? And then I think the other thing I wanted to comment on is there's some silver linings to the pandemic in terms of those carbon reductions, but there's also some black clouds, because with the reduction in people returning to central workplaces, the most affected people are service sector employees, who typically are lower income. And I can't say what the racial makeup of those people are, because I've never done the research, but I suspect that there's probably some disproportionate impacts on the people who've been left out of that. And if we want to have an equitable climate policy, we need to recognize that win has come with some losses, and need to figure out how to make sure that the next iteration of the climate plan can include what the effects are on those people who are displaced out of their previous jobs.
Thanks, Nick. Tess?
Yeah, to both of those last comments from Kim and Nick, I think it'll be interesting to see what happens when Metro Transit reduces their fares, which I think is starting in September, that all fares will be $1, and whether that encourages people maybe who weren't even using transit before to lighten up some of the congestion. I've certainly seen it coming back very quickly on the freeways, and whether that might affect. That's certainly, I think, an important way that we need to be addressing a lot of issues, is embracing mass transit and alternate transit. A couple questions on that graph showing the natural gas creeping up. Is that a business as usual, or does that take into account any of what we talked about last week with the different sort of options that have been studied, and what would those maybe look like? And then Kim, you were saying something about electricity use being reduced and the shift between daytime and evening use having an impact on that. And I didn't quite catch that, and wondering if that probably is mostly in Excel's domain, but whether that indicates anything about the need for storage. Thanks.
Yeah, sure. Sorry, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yes.
Okay, sorry. I lost the icon. The natural gas projections are based on the trend line that we've had since we've been taking emissions, and they're the dark spots here. So we've had, it is very hard to sort of plot that, but if you take this trend line that we've had since 2006 through our 2020 emissions, which include this here, which was, and this represents 1.5 million metric ton equivalents of CO2. Our goal is to get us down in at 80% reduction is to get us down to 1. So, and quite honestly, obviously the IPCC and others are saying to bring that down to net zero or carbon neutral much more quickly than that. So we'll be adjusting that. But basically that's what this trend is. It is not based on any of the potential decarbonization strategies that have been touched on. But ultimately, we even from electrification and things like that, the sort of cost parity that we're seeing is we did quite a bit of analysis on this with the convention center just recently. It's you know, the cost parity between going electrification for heating anyway is still, you know, 10 years out. So natural gas remains to be quite competitive, shall we say. So. Sorry, I'm just trying to figure out how to get out of my out of this particular screen to exit out.
That natural gas line is definitely the it seems like the, because it's all infrastructure that already exists that we are drawing from every day, and it seems like that really kind of needs to be a focus to figure out, you know, massive investments in home energy efficiency paired with whatever sort of rebates or support or anything we can get from utilities, federal government, whoever, to move to electrification and make it more cost competitive, because it costs less now to heat our homes with gas, but is costing us more in the long run.
I will just add one more, just sort of, again, very timely information about that. We have been working on for the last 2 years and of course Hannah knows this because she was part of our team, our social cost of carbon analysis. Like, where do we have leverage points to be able to apply a social cost of carbon in order to, one, basically create market conditions which actually fully reflect the impact of fossil fuels and carbon emissions, but also to be able to create revenue sources from carbon emission producers that can help us offset and create more efficiency with a focus on our environmental justice and frontline communities. And so I'm happy to say that the mayor has included funding to bring on board a full-time, or maybe not full-time, but at least a staff person as a consultant initially, to help us work on how we can integrate that within our accounting of the business that we do at the city, and how we might apply that across some of the things that we had already explored within a research project that we've been doing with Fresh Energy. Unfortunately, we didn't have the opportunity to roll this out last year. We were going to do it on March 20th at a city council meeting, but March 19th, 18th, 17th, I can't remember exactly, but right around there, we were told that we won't be working from the office anymore, and basically we're, you know, emergency orders and nothing except for dealing with public health is going to be considered at the council meetings. So it's been in the hopper for a year and a half, but the mayor's proposed budget does include us looking at how we can start applying a social cost of carbon to really start identifying where we are having carbon emissions. So, and to hopefully start creating some market signals around how to move towards non-carbon, more efficient processes throughout the economy. So that's kind of a new thing that just happened Friday with the mayor's budget address.
Nice. That's great to hear.
Kim, can you just what you said about the shift of the electricity demand between daytime and evening?
Yes. So within the city of Minneapolis, you know, we were just looking at the boundaries of the city. So we have much more energy use during the day, typically speaking, when our office and retail and entertainment districts are going on during the workday. What was interesting is the demand dropped significantly there, and therefore the amount of energy that was being supplied to the city of Minneapolis from a standpoint of like we used to be like right here, this was daytime and this was nighttime use. It kind of went like this. And as a result, the nighttime has a much, this is why they time of use and other things, much higher use of wind energy. And so when you position, when the demand shifts like that, the carbon intensity of the kilowatt hours that are being supplied to the city of Minneapolis are more likely to come from wind. And therefore, it seemed like there was a lot more renewables coming on, but it was actually amplified. It wasn't like they increased the amount of solar and wind by 20% in 1 year. It was the utilization of the solar and wind, and mainly wind. Quite honestly, solar is much smaller than wind. It's, you know, solar is 1/10 the amount of wind energy, which is more likely to happen at night. Cooler air is thicker and therefore is easier to turn the blades faster because the air has a higher density. So therefore, when it's cooler, therefore the wind energy is naturally producing much more at night. We took more energy at night relative to what we did in the past. That's how we were able to that's what the impact was of a decreased carbon intensity measure because of COVID.
Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Super interesting. Lauren?
Yeah, just a couple of thoughts from our discussion. This was a friend who recently had her air conditioning go out. And so, you know, she was talking to me about how she replaced her furnace at the same time and didn't really do any research to what she was going to buy, because when things like that happen, you're just like, I need to get my AC and furnace replaced immediately. So I just call somebody up and ask them for, you know, whatever I already had. So thinking about how, you know, if somebody searches furnace Minneapolis on Google, like what sort of results are they getting to show electric alternatives, or are the contractors or mechanical HVAC companies recommending electric options, or, you know, the potential energy or cost savings in the future, thinking about rebates and some of those things. So how do we get that information readily available to people who are sort of in crisis mode?
Mm-hmm.
And I guess I don't know how much of that already exists, but I'm assuming that it can always be beefed up. And then another thought on the parking, and my office is planning to return to work downtown this fall, and so parking has been a hot topic because lots of people have canceled their parking contracts downtown. And I thought it was interesting that the city of Minneapolis, some of their parking ramps are offering like $6 a day, sort of like day pass parking instead of requiring a full parking pass. Therefore incentivizing people to drive downtown. So they're lowering the cost of daily parking if you're buying sort of like a punch pass thing or something, which seems antithetical to trying to get people on the $1 Metro Transit rides, because if I can park downtown for $6, why would I spend $2 taking the bus or whatever? So for the people who've already always been driving, where I didn't really see the private parking companies doing that sort of deal.
Very, very interesting, Lauren. You know, it's the parking, you know, I appreciate the comments on the contractors. No, we haven't done a lot of work on that. I will tell you that one of the things we're kind of weak on is you know, just broadly marketing communications about things, but it's very important. So we haven't done a lot of that. CEE has been doing more on that, working with contractors. We're hoping with if we can get a tariff on bill financing, we're going to have selected contractors. We do have 0% financing. It does not finance. You cannot take it out to finance a gas furnace. It is only recommended. We have only electrification. We're excited about a tariff on bill financing because CenterPoint has actually agreed to allow to finance air source heat pumps, which will provide heating and air conditioning electrically, as well as solar, as part of our proposals. So we're hoping to see some of that electrification, but it is a challenge. On the transportation side, I'm going to look into that, but it's not surprising. The city of Minneapolis owns 40,000 spaces of parking in downtown Minneapolis. It's one of the reasons why the city is quite wealthy relative to other cities. We have a fair amount of ownership of a lot of properties. We own over 120 buildings. We own, like I said, 40,000 parking spaces. We own the water system that supplies to many other communities. So to a certain extent, and those are actually managed, and we actually manage all the ABC ramps as well too, for the Minnesota Department of Transportation. I'd actually like us to think about having that as a topic, because I wasn't aware that they're incentivizing people to drive in with the spot market $6, because that is, as you said, antithetical to our goal of getting people on transit and reducing vehicle miles traveled. And you saw we got to reduce vehicle miles traveled 20% a year in order to like keep up with the climate, you know, to keep up with our actual scientific based climate reduction goals. So that's new information to me, and I'll look into it either way, but I will I do think it might we kind of put that on the agenda too for a future topic around transportation.
Yeah, nice. Thanks, Lauren, for those points. Leslie?
I know we're pressed for time. I just have a question. I always have a question about this electrifying and changing everything to electricity. My thing is, what is the plan to get? What are you going to do with all the items once you start getting rid of some of these gas components? Like people are talking about changing people in the community's homes to electricity and things like that, office buildings and things. What are the plans to get rid of that, the stoves or the furnaces and things like that? That's what I'm more wondering about. And somebody had told me, well, we'll just let somebody else worry about that. And I kind of got appalled about that. But I'm just kind of wondering, are there any considerations or plans when this change comes with those items?
Well, I will just say, Leslie, that that has, to my knowledge, has not been considered actually. I will say that there's probably good opportunities for recycling, but I don't know, because the furnaces are quite a bit of metal and are not all that complicated, as far as like lots of, you know, lots of electronics. There's some, of course, in many cases, but that's a good question. You are definitely on the cutting edge of how that would happen, because you're right. I mean, we're going to have a major transition in the next 10 years. What happens with all that? And there's lots of discussions that actually with solar panels are required to be recycled in Minnesota. The MPCA has a whole program about that. It's very involved. They're able to do 98% recycling, pull out any of the minor materials like minor amounts of mercury or other things that might be included, and recapture that, and that's required. So it's an interesting concept. I can do some follow up on it, because I've got some really great smart people I work with that maybe have thought about it, but you are the first person that has brought that topic to me up, even though I've thought about electrification and for 2-3 years now about what that means and changing out our equipment. I have not thought about how we recycle or reuse the stuff that we have. So thank you for bringing that up.
Yeah, thank you, Leslie. Yeah, it is a cutting edge question and an important question too to think about. The appliances and also the natural gas infrastructure that exists around us, and if we're going to get off of gas, how can we utilize that existing system that is not carbon intensive? I think those discussions and questions are starting to happen, and it'll be interesting to see how they fully play out. We've got just a few minutes left. I don't see any hands up at the moment, but I just wanted to make sure we took a moment to, or Kim, do you want to say anything about that? I was going to ask about.
I know we went around. I thought this has been a really good discussion overall. We have a lot of stuff always on the table here. There are Google links in the agenda that please add thoughts or comments in regards to the enterprise renewable energy, sustainable building policy, or the 100% renewable electricity policy. And I'm just wondering if I could ask the chair to entertain me for a moment to try a Mentimeter, which is something new, to see if folks can just sort of click it in. One of the things we're looking at with the enterprise sustainable building policy is what sort of goal line we should set for requiring net zero energy buildings for city of Minneapolis projects. So can I just try that for a second?
Yeah, go for it.
And SEAC commissioners, you have to, what I'm going to ask you to do is to go to menti.com. I'm going to share the screen here. And then what you have to do is type in this code and then vote on what is the date that all enterprise buildings should be net zero energy, 2025, 2030, or 2035. Let's just take a minute to see if this can work with folks and see how this goes, just to kind of test out. All right, we got one already coming up. All right. For anyone that's on the phone, it's menti, MENTI.com. The code is 6615-0622, and that'll get you to the question. 6615-0622.
And Kim, so it's net zero energy, not net zero carbon.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, in Minneapolis, that we differentiate because of the fact that carbon could include nuclear fuel, and the city of Minneapolis has taken a position to support closing down nuclear plants when they their current licenses expire in 2030-ish.
Got
it. As I've said many times today, it's it's never a dull day at the city of Minneapolis because something you didn't think about before is gonna hit you in the face. All right, so maybe take another minute or so, but
I will tell you that as an
all right.
architect, I think 2025, but like 2030 is what architecture firms are signing on to agree to. So that's like the sort of like goal that's already in place. So it seems hard to speed up something that is already such a stretch goal.
Right. Yeah, and we have right now been pushing statewide for a 20 all buildings with our better buildings legislation by 2036 to be net zero energy through statewide building code. I've been trying to get the city of Minneapolis to commit to a 2030 goal to lead. I'm leaning towards us getting to 2025 because of the IPCC situation that just came out last week. Honestly, it's like, I mean, one thing we have control over is setting policy. We may not get there, but that's something we do have the ability to do. And so I kind of feel like let's do what I have the ability to do. So that's why I agree with you though. I mean, I don't know about the expense and whether it's even technically feasible in some cases, especially here. This is not, San Francisco where it stays 45 at, even at its coldest. So anyway, I'm sorry. This is fun. This turned out really good. We can do it. I know I'm a little bit of a technology novice, but I thought that was kind of fun to try stuff, and maybe we'll see how we can work that out. Again, there's Google Docs that are available to give your comments on our enterprise sustainability policy that we sent out, as well as our 100% renewable electric. As there are, so anything you have to give us feedback on, greatly appreciate. Thank you for the time tonight and the good discussion we've had. So let's do more, faster, better, right?
Definitely. I just want to jump in. Thanks so much, Kim, for facilitating and all the substantive work you're doing and offering the updates to major projects that you weren't anticipating doing. So I really appreciate you there. And thanks, Tess, for the reminder on having those on the agenda. I really appreciate that too. I also want to shout out Stacy Miller for being here as sustainability staff at the meeting. And I see Mark's hand was up, but I also want to make sure we were talking about having working groups or establishing a working group to give recommendations on science-based targets. You don't have to decide right in this moment, but if that is something you're interested in, email Kim and Aaron and myself. And I think the goal would be to get together and come up with some recommendations, which would guide the Minneapolis's updated climate action equity plan, and present those in October. So if that's something that piques your interest, let us know. And if there's anyone who knows they want to participate now, feel free to chime in.
Just to make sure I got this right, it's for the Climate Equity Action Plan?
Yeah,
Right.
I think that is, go ahead, Kim, you can speak.
Yeah, that's what we're hoping. to be able to sort of just set the high level goals that we're going to go at and kind of discuss like net zero carbon, net zero energy, you know, some of those issues, and make a recommendation to SEAC in October. And so I will send out an email in the next day or two to the full SEAC group, and just to give you a heads up on that, and then you can respond individually, or love to have a few people if you're right now interested in that. We just want to get together, have a conversation, think about the impacts, and kind of make a recommendation to SEAC, because this is it's a lot of factors to think about related to it. So it's hard to do it with a larger group. So hoping to have a little smaller group, and we can have a little more discussion focused on that topic.
Thanks. Because I would be interested. However, I do need to know what the time commitment is prior. So I will wait for that email.
Okay, good to know. Thank you.
This is Leslie, not to interrupt. I'm interested. So you can put my name down and send me information, and I'll be more than happy to read and be a part of it. Thank you for the invite.
Awesome. Thanks, Leslie. All right,
Okay.
we are 1 minute past. Any other urgent, outstanding things anyone needs to say? All right, well, thank you everyone so much for this really robust discussion, and hope everyone has a good month and stays well.
Thanks, everyone.
Oh wait, do we need a
folks.
motion to adjourn? Can I motion to
sorry.
adjourn?
I motion to adjourn.
Thank you, Mark.
I second it.
All right, Leslie, thanks. Got a second, and we don't need a roll call for that.
Good night.
Awesome. Good night.
Thank you, Stacy. Sorry we
Night.
didn't get your introduction in, but appreciate your support always. Thanks, Anna, for
Thanks, Stacy.
your good facilitation.
Oh,
Great discussion tonight.
Yeah, it was a really nice discussion. Stacy, it's nice to see you. It's been a while.
Good to see you all. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.